You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Cards to the Moon. This is episode 337, and my name is Clark from 5cardguys.com, and you can also find me on social media at 5cardguys on Instagram, YouTube, and on Facebook. So I normally have Hyung and John, or Will and Roy, co-hosting with me on Tuesday episodes, but we're kind of on a holiday schedule, so we're going to take a couple of weeks off, but not to worry, we still have new episodes that should get us through into 2026, including today's episode, which isn't your typical episode because we recorded most of it during a RIP night session we had just last week at Hyung's studio space. And I thought it worked out really well because all the aforementioned co-hosts were in attendance, so you hear from all of them, as well as our hobby friend Daryl Chan, aka DC, who dropped by. But before we play the next two segments, off the top, I just wanted to mention the latest development that most of you already probably heard concerning PSA's parent company, Collectors Holdings, and their plans to acquire Beckett. And that news is Representative Pat Ryan has called on the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, to open an antitrust investigation into Collectors Holdings. And he wrote, quote, "By systematically acquiring its primary competitors, Collectors has effectively dismantled market competition. If its purchase of Beckett goes through, Collectors will control over 80% of the industry's volume." End quote. So, as of this recording, there's no further update, but we'll obviously keep on top of it whenever there is. And it's also a heads up because we do talk about the acquisition news of Beckett in this episode with the guys, and we assume that everything will still go through. All right, so with that, let's go to our pre-recorded segment of Hobby Headlines. All right, Hyung, we heard the big news that PSA's parent company, Collectors, is buying out Beckett unless the U.S. government intervenes. That kind of ruins our plans to buy out BGS. What are your thoughts about this whole acquisition? And yeah, I want to hear from you.
It's BS, Clark. It's BS. I told you we could have done that, crowdfunded, and then we could have flipped to PSA during that time. This would have been the greatest flip. We acquired, because I think it was like, what you say, 30 million? Mm-hmm. I'm sure PSA paid more for that, but I thought, it's crazy. It's unbelievable that PSA went that route. I didn't think they were, but yeah, is it a monopoly?
So this is what we're debating, right? And we're gonna see if the U.S. government intervenes. I don't think so, but yeah.
But does BGS qualify to even move the needle to make it a monopoly because they weren't grading any cards?
This is Jeff Wilson's argument, right? He said on one of his posts that PSA grades 20,000, say, and then BGS grades.
They haven't been grading, so what defines a monopoly, I guess?
And one of the hobby lawyers, Paul Lesko, I think in a rebuttal said it's something about market share. Like how much market share they have, and if you add BGS to it, Collectors, the PSA's parent company, is at about almost 80%, and the threshold is like 75. So.
They're monopoly. They're breaking the rules. So let's reject it. And then, hey guys, let's go, listeners to Cards to the Moon.
Let's crowdfund. But here's a problem. For people to reject it or people to put pressure on the U.S. government, people actually have to care that much about the hobby, right? So
I think you have. I do believe you have people that care enough of the hobby. Even we're having RIP night here. I think we have 5 or 6 guys that care about the hobby that would vouch.
We're Canadians though, so yeah, I don't know how much influence you have. But anyway, if the deal goes through, PSA bought out Beckett, what do you think that means for the hobby, if anything?
You know what? I wouldn't be too thrilled that PSA did it, but I think Beckett is an important part of the hobby. Like, I wish that Beckett did more with their catalogs that we grew up on. I still would buy those because I think they're great reading material, like in the bathroom. They're perfect. You stick it in the public bathroom, or if you have an office, like I have an office, I would put that in the bathroom, for instance. Perfect material, right? But yeah, regardless, I'm hoping that it works out for the better. If it's a monopoly, then yeah, I would be concerned. 100%. There's a lot of concern for that, and yeah, I just think there's a lot of value still in BGS. I think BGS slabs are undervalued, so I think there's a good buying opportunity there. I also think that grading with BGS, and this is what I hope, that there's no upcharge. If there's a new upcharge, then you know what, I'm disappointed in PSA. And yeah, I think they have to address those issues for sure.
A lot of questions from a lot of collectors, and the upcharge one is a huge one because PSA makes a ton of cash that way. And, everyone wants the BGS black label. Yeah. So you can imagine what the premium would be on those if there were upcharges. But, we've already seen what PSA or collectors has done with the SGC brand, just kind of pummeled it to the ground. Are you afraid or concerned at all that they might do the same with Beckett?
I hope not, because like I said, I don't know what their plan was with SGC. I still believe that SGC is a solid brand, and it, like I said, history, market will dictate the true value of it. And there's a lot of SGC cards, especially that SGC 9 mantle that sold for I believe 12 million last year, a couple of years ago. Like, those are historic sales that still bring value to SGC. So one, I hope that they don't go that route with BGS because, like I said, BGS still, in my opinion, has great value. I hope they don't change subgrades. I hope they don't change the 9.5 to a 10. But those are things that might be realistic. With PSA, you never know. And yeah, I'm 50-50 right now. See what happens. But it would be great if they do get rejected so that, like I said, there's other opportunities. I think we should buy BGS.
I'm with you. So we'll see. But yeah, I think, even when we discussed it on the pod previously about someone needing to take over, we didn't know it would be collectors, but someone needing to take over and just infuse cash and then just kind of rebrand a little bit. Yeah. They've got that branding power. But I guess what I'm concerned about, and a lot of people are concerned about, is what they did with SGC, right? Yeah, so that's
for sure. Absolutely. And that's what you hope that doesn't happen. What they did, they almost like squeezed everything out of SGC and kind of like uplifted PSA. But with Beckett, one thing that I will say they have a great opportunity is the black label is very, very demanded. And Beckett did absolutely a terrible, terrible job marketing that. And that would be my avenue of marketing. And PSA is very good at marketing. So, the black label is their story if they do do that. And I could see the black label being the next biggest thing coming up in the hobby.
Sure, for sure. And one last thing I want to ask you, because, we've discussed grading at length over the 5 seasons we've had Cards to the Moon. The theory is out there that collectors bought it to prevent essentially their number one competitor, which is Fanatics, of buying the Beckett brand, which, some of us speculated that Fanatics could make that move. That's what they were missing, the grading company. And so this was kind of a preemptive move. Do you think that there's any merit to that?
I think there is merit to that. Like, I see that side too. And that's one thing that I wouldn't want either. I wouldn't want Fanatics to monopolize, or I guess it would be Fanatics would be more vertical integration than monopolize. So, I'd rather have Fanatics buy BGS, but like PSA doing that, they're dominating the grading scene. So I see that aspect. I see that strategic move. But like I said, it's going to be very interesting because I think Beckett is a great brand. And if it is for the better, it's to be seen. And I think with all the heat PSA is getting, it's theirs to prove that, hey, if they're going to acquire Beckett, they better do something very positive for the hobby, because a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth with what has happened with PSA over the last 2 months. Will that matter? Probably not. Like we always say, but yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we'll wait and see what ultimately happens, but a huge piece of news development in the hobby, that's for sure. All right, I'm here with Will now, and we know that Will is the most critical out of all of us on Cards to the Moon when it comes to grading. So I'm really curious about your thoughts, Will, about the latest big news, which is, of course, PSA's parent company, Collectors, buying out Beckett grading company. So yeah, what went through your mind when you first heard that news?
There's a lot of thoughts that I had, and a lot of things that I can't say on film or anything where there's a record of it. So I'll bite my tongue as much as possible. I was very sad when SGC got purchased because I thought something bad would end up happening to them, and look what happened. And with the news of Collectors buying BGS, yeah, I mean, like, I think I feel a little less worse because now it's solidified. There is just one group, one mega group now to hate. So all your hate can be channeled to just one direct source. And really, for BGS, like, they're just, there was nothing going. There was no movement. They're just poking it with a stick, like in The Simpsons with Ralph Wiggum poking with a stick, just asking it to do something. And so I guess this is something. So good for BGS for getting bought out. But yeah, it's terrible news for the hobby. It's terrible news for collectors. It's great for the flippers, and it's great for the PSA fanboys. So congratulations.
I know. I mean, I have yet to meet one person that was ecstatic about this, other than Jeff Wilson. He seems to be. But other than Jeff, you mentioned SGC, just how PSA treated them, and obviously that's the main concern for a lot of us collectors who like the BGS slabs. But they did mention, PSA, the parent company, did mention that it will remain an independent. Essentially, it will work independently, right? So from a scale of 0 to 100, how confident are you that they will keep their word, that BGS will be an independent run company under the Collectors umbrella? Or do you think it's really just a matter of time till they take over and do what they did with SGC?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely independent because they are going to be crushing BGS and folding them into nothing. And if that was their own appendage, like if they were smashing their own pinky finger, it would hurt. But they're going to keep it independent, so it's somebody else's pinky that they're smashing and hammering and disposing of. So yeah, I truly believe they're going to be honorable to their word. They're going to keep it independent, and then just independently smash them and remove them from existence.
I sense a lot of sarcasm in that answer. People don't get what Will's trying to communicate. But does this change anything for you? And I know you're not a big fan of grading, but we are all suckers for grading because that's what gives it value right now. Does this change your mind at all about buying BGS slabs because of this latest development?
Yeah, I think we should all be racing to buy BGS slabs now because there's gonna be a lot of ways to convert them into new PSA slabs, and so I think there's a market for BGS stuff, but the market is only for you to get it and then flip it into PSA slabs.
So Will isn't very confident that BGS slabs will exist even in 5 to 10 years from now, when it'll be so much easier to convert to PSA. But do you in the meantime? I was just talking to Hyung about this. Are you concerned about upcharges coming to BGS?
Yeah, there might be. I've never submitted to BGS, so it makes no difference to me. I've never been upcharged on PSA anyway, because all I get are PSA 7s, so I'm not even worried about upcharges anywhere until a new grading company comes in and revolutionize the game. Then yeah, I'm not dealing with upcharges anyways.
Not concerned. Okay, last question for me on this topic, Will. You kind of said unless a new company comes along, how about an existing company like CGC or even Tag? Do you think now that BGS is under the collector's umbrella, they are viable competitors.
Yeah, they're definitely not viable competitors. I remember I was just listening to you guys, you and Hyung, on the pod last week, talking about the move that CGC made in light of the moves that PSA were making, how they were extending their service times and raising prices, and CGC's response was, "We're also raising our prices." So I forget what the question is. What am I trashing again?
It seems like you're trashing CGC as a viable competitor.
Oh, yes. So, I mean, I don't think they can be a viable competitor because they are doing everything they can to not be competitive with PSA. I just want to throw money at a good company who will grade my cards fairly and return my cards in a reasonable amount of time. And no company, all the companies refuse to do that. That simple thing. They refuse to do that. So I don't know what to do. I'm not grading anything. Everything's raw. I'm just waiting.
All right, I'm gonna end Will's misery here because of just talking at grading at length is depressing both of us right now. But I'm going to just say this: I think Tag's got a shot. If Tag just does what it does, and we all agree that Tag slabs look amazing, I'm putting my money on Tag. So we'll see what happens. Okay, now I got Roy with me, our other co-host of Cards to the Moon, and he's our in-house Pokemon expert as well. He'll deny it, but he is, in fact, the most knowledgeable Pokemon out of the five of us at least. But I want to ask you about the BGS, the Beckett acquisition of PSA's parent company Collectors. Obviously, PSA has a huge market share in Pokemon cards as well. So your general thoughts on the latest acquisition by PSA.
Yeah, when you think about it at first, you're like, holy, what's going to happen? Is the same outcome as SGC going to happen to BGS? But with BGS's history and what they offer, I feel like it would be a disservice for Collectors to do the same thing that they did to SGC. And they really need to revamp how BGS is, I guess, their product is shown to the public. And if they do it right, BGS could come back to the top. Maybe not the top, obviously, because PSA is their baby, but they could revive BGS to a certain level where it's more respectable or more sought out after than it is currently. So that's the hope, right? Because to kill a brand like BGS, it would be a shame for the hobby. So let's hope they don't do that, and let's hope they respect the brand. They really try to put in their dollars to make BGS work, because it'll be beneficial to everybody, beneficial to the shareholders of Collectors, but also beneficial to the hobbyists who are submitting, and all the Beckett slabs that are out there, for them to crush BGS and those slabs to be almost worthless, for them to just crack it out and send to the PSA, that would be a shame. So let's hope they do, put in the dollars, put in the marketing, and really push the brand, because it'll benefit both Collectors, PSA, and the hobby. So, but yeah, it's hard to think that that's what they'll do, because PSA is really their golden child, and for them to push and put all the marketing dollars that they do to PSA into BGS, I feel like it just doesn't seem realistic. But for us hobbyists, we have to stay faithful that they do kind of push that envelope, that they do kind of bring BGS back to the spotlight, because that's what we need, right? So let's hope that's what it is.
I mean, out of all of us, Roy, you're the most optimistic. Will is really depressed when I asked him this exact same question. So he says he's just keeping his cards raw from now on. But how confident? I mean, you're saying all the right things, and I'm hopeful too. I hope that people from the loyal listeners to the pod will know I'm a huge Beckett guy. Like, a lot of my cards are in Beckett slabs. But really, how confident are you that PSA or their parent company Collectors will be true to their word, keep Beckett independent like they said they would do? For you, I know you've been trying to get some BGS black labels for some of your Pokemon cards. Does this change at all with your strategy, knowing that PSA kind of now owns Beckett as well?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a 50-50 coin flip, whether they're going to put in the money and put in the resources into BGS, because it's like if they eliminate BGS, really, the PSA is going to be the standalone grading company out of all of them, right? Um, but you have to stay faithful, right? Yeah, like and like if they're trying to squeeze out the pennies out of BGS by pumping black labels more and keeping the collectors happy, then it'll just crash BGS because the more black labels they put out, it devalues their product. And like right now, BGS is the black label is what everyone's chasing. If you're not going to get a PSA 10, you sub to BGS to potentially get the 9.5. But really, everyone's trying to get that black label if they have a good looking card. And if they just continually say, "Hey, let's be lighter and more lenient on the grading of the black label," for short term, it'll be great because collectors are going to be like, "Yes, I got a black label." But once that pop count goes to 100, 200, you're going to be like, "This is not a real black label," and that'll just bring the product down, and that'll just crash BGS because that's the only thing that's really keeping it together is like the low pop black label. So let's hope they don't do that, and let's hope BGS comes to the spotlight in 2026.
I think there's going to be like two eras: pre 2026, before Beckett got bought out, black labels, and then the post 2026. I don't know how you'll be able to tell the difference, though. That's the challenge. I guess it depends on the card itself. If it was came out after 2026, but yeah, I agree with you. If BGS black labels get flooded onto the market, that's going to crash the value of a lot of these black label cards. Your thoughts on? I didn't ask this. I don't think we really talked about this with the other guys, but one of the thoughts is that maybe BGS will change their grading standards. You know how they tried to do it before and there was backlash, but PSA, they might just say, F it. We're going to go all 9.5s are 10s. All 10s are black labels. You have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it may help BGS in terms of getting more people to sub with them, but if they keep the black label standard and then they bump up, like similar to what CGC is doing, they have their pristine. So black label, like the BGS keeps their black label, and then BGS 9.5s would be 10s, and then the rest 9s or something like that. Yeah, it may help their longevity in terms of like, because like at the end of the day, it's value that the consumer is looking for, the people that are submitting. And if they're getting value back from BGS by getting a 10 instead of a 9.5, and then still having the gold standard of the black label, then I think it could work. And I'm not against it because at this point, you need to shake up what they're doing right now because what they've been doing hasn't been working. Either that or they offer a turnaround time that could beat anybody else in the marketplace. If they could come back and have the exact same standards that they do now with the 10, the 9.5s, but have a turnaround time of like 15 days, then I think BGS could come back to shine. But if they don't do that and they change their standards in terms of grading, then it's tough to say. But I think it will help them in the long run because what's working with them now isn't really working at all. So
I would agree with you, all except the fast turnaround times. That's what SGC had going, and then they're pretty much dead still. So with what PSA has done to SGC. But last question on this grading topic. CGC, I asked Will this too. CGC and Tag. Do you think any of those two are viable alternatives now that Beckett is kind of under the collector's umbrella?
I mean, you see it in the numbers, right? You see Tag, their submission rates, CGC, their submission rates, they're climbing. They're probably climbing the highest in terms of year over year or month over month, right? So they're at least in the TCG market. I know sports guys really don't send to CGC. I don't think I've ever seen a sports slab and a CGC slab. Similar with Tag, like these guys are targeting a different demographic. They're not targeting the entire sports card market. They're targeting the TCG market. So, and TCG being 60 or 70% of all marketplace, they have a good strategy going on, and they have their loyalists. And like people submit to CGC because they have quick turnaround times. There's no upcharge, and they get their value from it. They send it, they get it quick, and then they flip it. Whereas PSA, you do bulk submission, you're waiting 5 months, and they may not get their value, right? Especially how the modern market is now. If you don't flip it right away, you could be potentially losing money. So I think CGC and Tag are still very, very viable options with the acquisition of BGS.
Yeah, definitely for TCG, like you were saying. But I think if they really want to be true viable alternatives, they got to start marketing to sports card collectors, because that's a huge segment that they're missing. But yeah, I agree with you on that point. Okay, we got our good friend DC Daryl. He's with us on Rip Night, so we're excited to get that started. But before we do, I kind of wanted to get you for this podcast because you've been a regular guest. You've been guest hosted with me last time you were on, so that was fun. But yeah, want to get your thoughts, especially your thoughts, because you have a lot of experience between, having PSA slabs and Beckett slabs, and with this latest news of BGS being acquired by PSA's parent company, Collectors. Yeah, your initial thoughts when you first heard the news.
I thought this was kind of inevitable, but the whole thing got sped up because of what crap happened the week before. To be honest, with that whole scandal with PSA, I think they were just a little bit more having to do this now. It's always easy to talk about it later on when you see all the chips starting to fall, but literally, I think this was inevitable. It's just that the timeline gets sped up. Yes. So I don't know what to say except, hopefully it's not a bad thing, because we saw what happened with SGC. Initially, you're thinking, oh, maybe they're going to have two different tiers, and then look at SGC now. So I'm worried about what's happening internally, even though they say it's going to still be run independently. I don't know, but only time will really tell.
Yeah, I've been asking the same question, whether we're confident of Beckett remaining independent. But does this change at all for you, who you submit to, now that they're under the same umbrella, Collector's umbrella?
It's a tricky question. I mean, I've been going between PSA and BGS stuff. If I get a PSA 9, I'll try to get it a 9.5. If I get like a PSA 9, I'm sorry, again, going back, like if I get a PSA 9, I try to go to BGS 9.5. Sometimes if I get a 9.5, I'll try to go to a 10. Now, I don't know how it's going to change my thinking. I still think that BGS 10s will hold a premium, and definitely the black labels will hold a premium. I guess it just depends what happens with PSA and how they try to utilize this acquisition. I mean, maybe they're looking to try to maybe acquire all the BGS really good graders, right? And then maybe that's what's going to happen. Who knows? For myself, I mean, I still love the black label, and I've always been a big supporter of BGS in general. I always just like the look of the slabs from the very, very beginning, and I like the whole idea with the subgrades. But now after what happened with PSA and it's documented, now I kind of wonder, is it better to resub a PSA 9 and try to get a 10? The only issue is, do I want to wait 6 months to get that? Whereas, like with BGS, I will just go do like same day. Like if I go to a show, I'll do like a same day reslab or, a GCR or something like this, just to be able to do it. I guess it depends on what kind of slab you have and if it's a short-term or long-term play.
I thought the same thing about, wondering whether PSA, how they'll treat BGS, right? Like with crossovers, is there going to be, we got to trust that they're going to be independent, but who can really believe that? Do you know what I mean? That's the biggest question for a lot of us collectors. So I guess we'll wait and see. But yeah, I'm curious. Do you think there are any viable competitors to PSA now, to collectors, whether it's CGC or Tag?
I don't think so. I don't like either of those grading companies. Sometimes when I see like a nice card in like a Tag or a C3, or I haven't seen it. We were talking about HGA earlier. Honestly, that wasn't bad, like crossover. I would take shots at that just because when I look at a card, I've always told you guys, like, I'm not a grader. I literally look at the card. I can see centering. I can see if there's a crease or not. But when it's the other stuff, it's not really me. So if I already have something that's in a slab, and it has a decent grade, I'll take a shot at trying to bump that. And that's like just a risk reward kind of thing. Same thing with CGC. I mean, I found some cards at the National, like this Nolan Ryan specifically. I thought like it looked really, really good, and I was going to cross it over, but I ended up just, trading it away, but getting really good value for it, just because the person that I traded to thought the same thing. But I don't think those other grading companies are going to have the same kind of clout that PSA has. Even if there's notoriety attached to it, PSA is still going to sell. I think BGS is still going to sell, albeit underneath a PSA 10. But a BGS 10 and a Black Label 10 are still going to be still the best cards you can still get.
So obviously you're not as concerned with some of the other guys, especially with what happened with SGC, how collectors treated them, that BGS would take that kind of same pathway. So let's just say PSA, we take their word at face value that they're going to leave it independent. But, with collectors, the parent company having a lot of money, they start investing into the BGS brand. Let's say that happens. What would you like to see Beckett become in terms of the grading company with just this extra cash infusion?
Well, I think Beckett can, if they keep their method the same way, I think it can be good. But sort of the way I thought SGC was going to be when PSA took it over was sort of like a Lexus Toyota kind of deal. Like you would have like a higher tier service, and then you have like a little bit not as high tier. The whole thing that I'm actually worried about is whether or not PSA starts enforcing upcharges on BGS slabs. Because you imagine if all of a sudden BGS 10s or Black Labels start getting these upcharges. That's my only worry. What I love about BGS is they never charged upcharges, and they were very transparent with the subs. So I like that. I guess there are different markets for both grading companies, and if they can coexist together, I think it's good, because I think there are collectors for both levels. Just if they do what they did with SGC, I'm a little bit worried, because I don't think anyone saw that coming, to be honest. I thought it was going to be, hey, if you can't afford PSA, let's do SGC. You'll still get a multiplier value for your cards, but you'll get it quicker and it won't cost you as much. But on the flip side, you won't get the same value, so to speak, as a PSA 10. I still think Beckett holds a lot. I just hope they don't change everything. Specifically, I hope they don't change the grading scale. Because if they change that grading scale like they were talking before, then you've lost me.
That's so interesting, because I asked Roy the same question. He doesn't mind if they changed it. So I guess it's kind of like, this would be a good poll to see who would mind and who would just leave BGS.
The reason why people will care, it depends on what kind of grades they have on their cards right now. So if it benefits them, of course they're going to want to do that, right? Sure. Specifically. But I think if they do that, they're just going to degrade the brand, because right now what BGS has going for them is those pristine 10s, and especially that Black Label. And when PSA went through that little bit of a scandal, I feel BGS actually had a small window to capitalize, grab a bunch of market share, and like say, hey, listen, we're not going through this, da-da-da-da-da, and this is why you should grade with us. But then I think this is also what spawned PSA buying, like accelerating that buyout. You gotta say, like, coincidentally, it happened literally like a week after, right? I mean, as much as you say, and I don't know, like, good thing I don't sub to PSA directly, so they don't know me like that. But what I'm saying is, like, that's terrible.
Totally agree. But you know what? To be honest, Beckett had a lot of opportunities to gain market share, and they just flubbed it up time after time. So yeah. And I want to end off with this. You kind of mentioned and already answered the question I want to ask you, the fear of upcharges for BGS. Obviously, that's a lot of other people's concern. The temptation is going to be great for Collectors Inc. to implement that. If they do you think that will potentially kill the Beckett brand?
There's not much choice after that. It's either one or the other, right? At that point, if there's only one quote-unquote real grading choice, then people have no choice if they want to grade their cards. The thing is, once they enforce that upcharge, depending on what it is, if it's going to be the same price across the board, then why would anyone go to BGS if the same thing is happening at PSA, right? So I think if Collectors ends up keeping it the same way, like they're talking about, independent, they should let Beckett run the way they're running and kind of let the market dictate what works for them. right? Because even though PSA has upcharges, people still pay them. But this also reflects in the selling price for some of these things. So it works and until it doesn't work. And the reason why it might not work is because there's a lot of doubt in a lot of people's heads right now based on what happened with that particular PSA order. And now there's a lot of other stuff coming out where people are checking their old certs just to see what happened. And I think only time will tell to see what happens. And then again, we were discussing this prior, before we got here. There's that lawsuit now, the civil lawsuit in California about the phantom upcharges. And again, I don't know how real that thing is. I haven't looked into it yet. But if that's real, this is going to put a lot of doubt in a lot of collectors' heads. And then the hobby itself, like when you shock something like this, especially when I don't know what percentage, but a very, very large percentage is PSA slabs, I don't know how this is going to affect the hobby.
Yeah, excellent point. And, if that scandal, if there's another scandal, you know what's going to happen? They're going to buy CGC, announce that.
Just own them all. Except you won't have just Lexus Toyota name. Lexus Toyota, whatever's under Toyota, and then blah, 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 even further down. I don't know.
Yep. Like I've been saying with all the other guys, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, time will tell. All right, so we got Johnny, co-host of Cars to the Moon, of course, and we're about to start Rip Night, but I want to ask you before we do, your thoughts on Beckett being acquired by PSA's parent company. What were your initial thoughts when you heard the news?
Oh, man. I mean, I guess we're surprised and not surprised at the same time. Yeah, I don't know what to think of. I think early on, you can see all the Instagram posts and social media. Everyone's kind of dogging it, and it's like, this is the end of Beckett, and it's just going to be another SGC situation where they just kind of go to the wayside. I know you're a big fan of Beckett, so I really hope that's not the case. But I'm kind of worried. I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of worried. I think PSA is just gonna eliminate all of their competitors, and we're just gonna have to take it, to keep it PG. I don't know, because the news of you guys probably talked about it, but the Pokemon scandal, all that stuff. All of that stuff, and as much as we can hate and as much as we can complain, if PSA keeps buying up all the competitors, there's really nothing we can do. So,
man, I wish I didn't ask you this question. You're sound pretty pessimistic, but to be fair, the other guys were too, especially Will. Will says he's shared this joke with Roy, but he said he's just keeping his cards raw now from now on. But you know what? This is interesting because I got dividing opinions on this. I want to hear yours. If PSA decides to kind of change things around for BGS, although they said they'll keep them independent, but one of the things is changing the grading scale. And I know you hate the 9.5. Would you be in favor of if Collectors Inc. came and said, you know what? BGS 9.5s are gone. We're going to make that into 10 and the 10s into black labels. You have no problems with that?
So first of all, when they say they're going to stay independent, I don't know how that makes me feel any better about the situation, because I really don't know how they can stay independent. But anyways, to the 10, I really think the downfall of BGS in the long term was the 9.5. I really do. Collectors are fickle. We want to see 10s, right? Doesn't matter. Even for PSA 10s, I think most people, even if you knew your card wasn't a PSA 10 and you got the 10, that's all you really care about, right? You want to see the 10. So if PSA and Collectors Universe decided to change things up at BGS and went with that 10, and then if you had to call the actual 10 like a 10 plus or a Diamond 10, I'm all for that. Go to the 10, get rid of the 9.5. True Beckett enthusiasts gonna love the 9.5. I'm all for the 10. Get rid of that 9.5. It's about time.
Well, last question for you then, because I know you're primarily a PSA guy, right? But and I asked this question to DC. If we believe PSA will just keep Beckett independent, that's a big if. But if that's the case, and they start to infuse cash in it, because we're always saying, man, if someone bought out Beckett and just put a lot of money into just turning it around, and just say Collectors Inc. is like, okay, yeah, that's what we're going to do. What else would you like to see from Beckett that might even persuade you to grade with Beckett in the future?
This is tough. I honestly think especially for SGC and Beckett, I think they should marry all the companies in some form. So I really think like if you have a BGS 9.5 True Gem, you should be able to cross it over instantly to PSA without the hassle. I think that'll be a big benefit. And kind of like the BGS, what's like the card review that you do at shows? I think in a similar way, if SGC or Beckett became, if they were at the 20-30 price point and PSA was at 50 per card, let's say the pricing jumped up. If you had the cheaper option to just grade to find out what the grade is, and it ends up being a True Gem or an SGC 10, and then you pay the upcharge to cross it over, like automatic crossover, guaranteed. I think that I could see that working in some sense. I'm very pessimistic about Beckett being independent. Like, I just don't understand how it's going to work out. But anyways, if they're work together and you can marry and you can do crossover at a cost, but it's a guaranteed crossover, I think fans would be on board with that. I don't know.
This is coming from a PSA fanboy. This is how PSA gets rid of Beckett. It's like automatic PSA 10 if you get BGS 9.5. Why not? Why don't you do that? So, actually, I have one more. Do you think there's at this point, if BGS comes under the collector's umbrella, that there is a viable alternative or competitor to PSA as a grading company?
Well, I mean, at this point, it's just CGC or CGS. Or I actually like Tag. I've mentioned it many times. I like Tag. I like their slabs. I like how it's like see-through. Kind of has that diamond sort of look. And they're very super transparent. I'm a big fan of Tag. I guess it's going to have to be CGC. And to be honest, they have a pretty good fan base with Pokemon and TCG. So I think they really do have a chance. I did see Neocard in Comics. He made fun of them because right as the PSA news broke about the Pokemon scandal, you see the CGC news about them upping prices, and it's just like, oh, come on! Like, you guys talked about it. Yeah, I didn't hear the episode, but yeah, I think perhaps that's a small miss for them. But I mean, they're going to be the last remaining big competitor, and I mean they're the number 2 anyways, so I think they have a decent shot, especially if PSA continues to. I mean, they've pissed off the Pokemon crowd, so there's a big opportunity for CGC there, and TCG's been sort of the big breadwinner in terms of grading right now, so they got a shot.
Yeah, hopefully that's the only miss that CGC will do, because they're sounding a lot like Beckett now. Just is miss after miss. So we'll see. Time will tell on that as well. All right, Clark here again. We only have one more segment for essentially what is our Christmas episode, since this will go up a couple of days before Christmas. And I asked the guys how they would describe the hobby this past year in 2025, since we are almost at the end of the year. Hyung and I actually recorded a separate episode, which will probably air next week. So you won't hear us in this segment, just a heads up. But one more thing, as for our pick one, I'll put up a poll, like I said in the previous segment, asking what you guys think if BGS does follow the PSA model to upcharge, especially for their black labels. Would you ever go back to Beckett again to grade your cards? All right. Without further ado then, we'll call this next segment Reflections. And since this is the last segment of the episode, just want to wish all of our listeners a Merry Christmas and a safe rest of the holiday season. Okay, enjoy and see you next week. All right, so for this segment, I just want to ask you, Will, since you have been a co-host with us the last several months, and obviously you've been a big part of the hobby. You're still engaged in it. 2025, how would you describe the hobby this past year?
Yeah, I mean, 2025 might be the most fun that I've had since I re-entered the hobby. Those COVID days were crazy. We were all just high on the fumes of every every sale just going higher and higher and higher, and we're just like enjoying that. And then that crash came, and I think I didn't look at cards for a couple months during that market crash because I was just like devastated by what my cards were doing. But 2025, I feel like there's been a resurgence in the hobby. I know locally at our card shows or like at Sport Card Expo, it's been way busier, way healthier, way more fun. Lots of cool cards coming out to the shows. But also we see, there's weekly smaller shows that are always being advertised in the Facebook groups and WhatsApp chat groups and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the hobby's alive. The hobby's growing again, and I'm super excited about that. I'm excited about 2026.
All right, so I got Roy again for this segment. Just wanted to ask you, this past year, we kind of talked about it in the last episode, but how would you say the hobby was, especially from the TCG point of view, this past year in 2025?
I mean, if you've been paying attention at all, it's been up, up, up. 2025 was an amazing year for TCG. If you came in along the ride, even halfway, you would have doubled your money. So it's been a great year. There's been a lot of influx in the hobby, and it seems like a lot of it was organic, which is a good thing. You don't want people kind of just manipulating the market and then just coming out of it, similar to how COVID was. But here in 2025, a lot of it was organic, whether it was due to social media, guys like Deep Pocket Monsters. Like, I have friends that don't even collect cards, whether it's sports or TCG, and they follow Deep Pocket Monsters because what the content he creates is very appealing to anyone. So whether it was that growth of social media content creators bringing in people to the TCG, there was a lot of growth. So it's been good. At the end of 2025, it seems like, at least in Pokemon, there's been, in the modern space, there's been a fall off, and it feels like it may continue in the modern space because a lot of Pokemon people have transitioned to One Piece, and One Piece is going crazy right now. So depending on what you collect, whether it's Pokemon or One Piece, you could say 2025 has been good or bad, but overall it's been red hot. And I guess similar to the sports card market, it's been hot as well. So whether you're collecting modern or vintage, I think what you need to think about is collect something that you like and try to collect something that's a little bit more rare instead of the super high pop stuff. But other than that, 2025 has been great, and let's hope 2026 is has a similar run.
All right, so again, I'm back here with DC, and the year's almost over. We're a week away from Christmas, but I want to get your thoughts on, you've been in the hobby for such a long time. How would you describe 2025 in the hobby for you?
I think 2025 was pretty crazy. For myself, just because I was doing more shows, I've been more exposed to the hobby world. Just seeing it more than 3 times a year like I was doing before, but now almost every month going to a show, you can actually see the amount of stuff changing hands. The hobby is alive. All those shows I went to, tons and tons of people just buying, trading, selling. It was a lot. So I feel like the amount of people that come in definitely, warrants the amount of product that's going out. And, higher end cards are still selling. I mean, we can see that these cards that have publicly been bought as assets, from bigger people like, Kevin O'Leary now, right? Like, just getting into, like, these finance guys getting into the hobby because they recognize collectibles as an asset class, just goes to show that, the world is kind of getting ready for this. And like, we that have been in the hobby for a while have always thought it, but now it's kind of coming to fruition. So we can see this whole year, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that has happened. There's been a lot of steam behind everything. And then, like, I guess all the timing with, Fanatics, and now how, like, Topps has, kind of taken over with even, like, Panini going out and all these different things that are happening. You can just kind of see the trend moving towards this. The only thing I would say is that now it feels like it's almost one person owning everything, which kind of gets a little messy because now conflicts of interest are kind of starting to rear their ugly head. And I guess we'll kind of see how those things pan out. So, and again, most recently with like PSA buying BGS, I mean, there's nothing left for them to buy, right? Like, they're not gonna buy. I don't think they're gonna buy CGC. Imagine they get into comic books and stuff like this too. What if they get into sneakers? Like all these different things, which is possible. I mean, such a big company with so much money can do a lot of different things. I guess we're gonna see what happens there. But overall, for 2025, I say definitely there's been massive growth.
Yes, totally agree. And, I'm always surprised by what new things can happen in the new year. So I'm expecting the same for 2026. So, yeah. All right. So I got John here again. Just your thoughts on the hobby. Yeah. What did you think about the hobby this past year?
Well, I think the big news in TCG Pokemon was huge this year. Besides the obvious, and obviously big cards, expensive cards in the hundreds of millions, did some crazy news all over the place. And Fanatics is continually pumping marketing, right? So in terms of social media and whatnot, I think it was big. But for myself personally in the hobby, with the influence of social media to a degree, I had a great time this year. I think all of us collectively, we went to a lot more shows. I had a lot of fun at the shows. I think in years past, there were a couple of shows where I walked in, a couple of hours, walked out. But this past year, maybe it's perhaps I had some new goals and, the cop chasing a couple of things. So there was something to chase. But I feel that was a general consensus with all of us in our friend group. I feel everyone was kind of chasing something and the enthusiasm and the excitement kind of came alive this year. And I mean, you could see it at the Toronto Expo. And I'm sure you could say that for people that went to the Dallas Card Show and all their local card shows. I really do think activity was up big time. So it was a fun year for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the general consensus. You nailed it. I think we all had a great time, and hopefully we carry that momentum into 2026. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.